Hey everyone, Dave here from Philly Tech Entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining our monthly webinar. Just getting set up here. Looks like I've got my screen shared, and I know there's a couple individuals joining. Hey Yoav. So yeah, why don't we get started by going into slideshow mode here. See how that looks. Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. So today we're going to be speaking about choosing the right AI, the pros and cons of some of the leading LLMs, large language models. We've been kind of doing a little bit of a series here the last couple of months of talking about LLMs and usually how it relates to SEO and what's going on there. And that comes from the fact that I run an SEO agency called Shortlist, and I've been running Philly Tech Entrepreneurs now for a couple of years, and I live in Philly for about 6 or so. And so this is part of like our monthly webinar series where every month we kind of go over a little topic just to kind of educate the community and try to contribute. And so today we're talking about LLMs, and we're going to kind of go through some of the different ones. And honestly, like if there's any one takeaway from this whole webinar, if you're like, hey, I need to leave literally right now. I've been on for 2 minutes. I want to leave. Basically, it's just that there are multiple LLMs out there, and they all have some different pros and cons. And depending on what you're doing, it might make more sense to use one over another. Now, first of all, if you don't use any of these at all, then I think you're really missing out. I'm just using ChatGPT like all the time, really so much more than Google at this point, to get just basic like top level information. So number one, if you're not using these, you really should start because most of them are like free within reason. And I just think the way they synthesize and provide information is great. But let's say you use ChatGPT a lot because that one's kind of, is probably the most well-known, is the one that was kind of the first mover and is talked about a lot. Depending on what you're doing, it might make sense to explore some of the others. Now, if we're just talking about basic stuff, you're just like, hey, I just want to learn about quinoa and like the pros and cons, or I want like a quinoa recipe or something like that, something relatively, let's call it basic. They're probably all going to be fine, right? They're all going to give you an answer that is pretty acceptable and will be a little different, but it's not going to totally lead you astray. Where it gets more nuanced is when you start to kind of get into, we'll call it more like a power user situation, where maybe you're doing some coding, maybe you're trying to create something visual, maybe you're trying to analyze a multi-100-page document. That's where, when you're doing like that kind of work, there's going to be some differences between the LLMs. And the only way to really kind of know is to start kind of experimenting and to sort of take the same problem, same project, whatever it is that you're doing, and sort of shop it around a bit and kind of see how each of them approach it. So that's kind of the big takeaway here. I'm going to go through these different LLMs. I'm going to kind of talk about them a little bit. I'm going to give some examples of what you might want to do with each of them. But at the end of the day, it's, hey, if you have a sizable project, like I said, coding, analyzing lots of content, creating something visual, something very academic, and you go to like ChatGPT because you're like, hey, I heard a lot about these LLMs and I want to try this out. And you try it out, it doesn't come back any good. Don't necessarily walk away with the opinion of, man, the LLMs, everyone's talking about them, they stink. Try the other ones and see if maybe another one is more suitable. Okay. So let's talk about them specifically. ChatGPT, I think, is kind of the most well-known. They've just come out very recently with their newest model, which is 5. It's always kind of like, hey, it's more powerful, it's faster, it can analyze more data, more accurate. It's always kind of like that. I can't necessarily tell you exactly, what is the difference between 4 and 5. Just that 5 is supposed to be better. I think ChatGPT is great because it's the most well-known. There's lots of like add-ons and plugins that can be used with it. They have a nice like freemium version, so you can kind of use it for free, and then basically you can pay to kind of get more usage out of it. I use it a lot. Like one of the things that they kind of have is projects. So you can kind of like create almost like a folder, and if anything you upload to that is kind of like stored or cached. And therefore, when you go back to that folder, it already has the memory of what you talked about before. So for example, like I was like doing some health things recently. I uploaded some lab tests. I had some ongoing medical things, and sort of like day to day, week to week, as like new information came, new test results came, I would go back to that folder and start to kind of like add more to the story. And it doesn't feel like you have to like start from scratch again. So I don't know all the other LLMs intimately, to be totally honest, but I really love the project features in ChatGPT and kind of like how that's allowed you to start to kind of create like an ongoing story with continuity, so that search doesn't just feel like this one-off thing every single time. That being said, people really rave about ChatGPT for things like coding. If you're debugging stuff, if you're trying to explain like a tricky algorithm, and then for the basic stuff, like marketing ideas. Give me some copy, give me some just a basic mix of creativity and structure. I feel like it's a good kind of all arounder. Another one is Grok. For, if I understand correctly, this one is Twitter's model. It's like Elon Musk, and I have not really played around with it that well. If you're like a Twitter user, I think you might already kind of have an account, kind of access to it. They say, yeah, excels at multi-step problem solving, complex mathematical and scientific challenges. And so, this might be better if we're doing something more technical. Again, I just want to have not played around with it as much, and I think it's a little bit newer. So probably more to learn about that. Another one is Claude, which I've heard a lot about, and I think people speak very highly of it. It's supposed to be very, great at like content. So it's widely praised for having kind of a natural, emotionally rich writing style. And so if you were doing some writing, if you were trying to write a blog article or create, whatever, children's bedtime story with recurring characters, maybe have it edit some text. That type of creative writing and storytelling is something that this might do particularly well. Another thing that came up is long document analysis. So there are, one thing I do run into is kind of like limits, with different LLMs. And so when you start to upload, multi-page, 100-page, text contracts and things like that, first of all, if you're not on like a paid version, it might just kind of like time out. If you are on a paid version, it may or may not sort of work. Claude, allegedly is good for very long text, more so than others, without kind of losing coherence. I have seen ChatGPT kind of like, they'll use the word hallucinate a lot. That's kind of the word that is used when an LLM kind of like makes something up and kind of like makes an error. I have seen that, happen. I've like uploaded relatively small documents, and I've caught it kind of misinterpreting the message or quotes or things like that. And so it's potential that maybe Claude just has a better grasp of like handling long text. Gemini is Google, and basically renowned for exceptional reasoning capabilities, multimodal understanding, complex problem solving tasks, right? We kind of see, honestly, like a lot of the same buzzwords used against all. They're all good at whatever complex problem solving tasks. That's why we built them, right? But so this one, because it's Google, if you're working in the Google, infrastructure, and you're using Google Workspace and Google Docs and Google Sheets and things like that, it probably is going to add some benefits there. There might be some sort of integrations. There might be some just natural things that come out of it. Sometimes with like ChatGPT, I'll ask it to kind of create a presentation or to write something. I'll be, hey, can you create like a Google Doc? And it like can't, and that always seems sort of odd. I'll find myself having to sort of like copy and paste the text into a Google Doc or something like that. Not a huge burden, but one of those things that seems like with all the advanced things it can do. You're always kind of surprised that then it can't just like turn into something basic like a Google Doc or a Google presentation. Gemini is in all likelihood, much better at this because it's kind of in the Google ecosystem. And so this one also is kind of, heralded for being able to summarize large content and reformat things, and being particularly good at processing images, audios, videos, things like that. Perplexity is another one, renowned for real-time web search capabilities. And basically, I had read that this one is really good for more of like an academic flair. So if you're looking for, research papers, with real citation of sources, something a little more kind of sciencey, Perplexity could be the way to go because it really summarizes from real-time web data. That may not be the case with all the other ones. Lately with ChatGPT 5, I do feel like it seems to be relatively up to date. But with some of the earlier models, I do remember it was like, it would say things like, hey, I'm only trained up to 2023. So anything more recent than that, basically, don't ask me. More recently, I kind of asked I asked it the other day about, the upcoming Eagles game and where I could watch it. And it knew that was tonight and things. So it does seem to kind of have the real-time capabilities. But allegedly, yes, Perplexity also is really good for some of these more like academic focus. So if you're in that field, seems like something that you would want to check out. DeepSeek is the Chinese one. This one made headlines some months ago for basically saying that they had replicated exactly what ChatGPT had done, except even a little better, and they had done it with like way faster and with way less resources. And that was kind of one of the nuances of this one, that it was very like cost efficient, and it was like, wow, how did the Chinese pull this off, basically. And so I think it's, I honestly haven't played around with it too much. Again, I'm not always a huge fan of tech from China, but supposedly, it's pretty free. It's unrestricted. There's probably it's probably not built out as much with different integrations, and then maybe some privacy trade-offs. Like that, I just feel like there's always that concern. Something's from China, we don't necessarily know how they're utilizing the data and things like that. But I think it's kind of your quick, free, everyday use type of scenario. So those are, those are 6 of the LLMs, but by no means is this sort of like exhaustive of the many AI tools that you can use to do work on, because what a lot of tools are doing is they are sort of building on top of these models, and then they are creating platforms specifically for people that want to do something with social media or coding or different things like that. And so a lot of understanding what to use and to kind of like deal with the FOMO of, hey, there's so many tools out there and how do I know which ones to use, is to start by understanding what you do a lot of. Are there repetitive tasks that you say, hey, every week I need to put together a newsletter. Every week I want to publish some things on LinkedIn. I, code very often. And then if you can say, hey, I'm sort of, in all likelihood going to be doing this type of work in the long run, that's when it benefits you to explore how each model would approach this type of task. Again, for kind of the one-offs, quick and dirty, I just want to get some information, they'll probably all kind of give you something decent. It's more for the longer term tasks that you kind of need to explore. This slide honestly is just kind of like, they're using the same words, long form reasoning, visual reasoning, research capabilities, advanced reasoning. Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords here, honestly, that don't really tell you all that much. You kind of just got to try it. They also, and the other last consideration is related to, what the policies are around pricing and usage, right? There are some nuances. Like, I don't think that that one of these is $20 a month and the other is $2,000 a month. There's not like some very clear and obvious differentiation, but there are definitely going to be differences in the usage limits in the free versions There are going to be some modest price differences, for the pro ones. So that's another one to kind of explore with. If you find that you're kind of running into a lot of limits, but you don't really want to pay, then maybe try some of the other ones. Spread out, your tasks, or see if they offer better limits. At the end of the day, this is just kind of an overview of how really just introducing that there are other models out there, and to give you some ideas around when you might choose one or the other. That was really the whole point of this presentation. So I hope that inspired you to play around with these. If you're not even sure, how to kind of get to these, then go to Google, because I don't know if they're not necessarily all going to be Gemini.com, Perplexity.com, or whatever. But if you go to Google and you search Gemini, Perplexity, DeepSeek, whatever, the top result will be the model, and you'll be able to sign up and play around with them. And I would say take the next thing that you're going to kind of put into a model, open up all 6 of these, put the same query in each one, and then just kind of see like how the experience is. I recently did that. I put something in ChatGPT, and then I went and I put kind of the same thing in Claude, and the information was very different. And something that ChatGPT said correctly was possible, Claude said was not. And I wish I knew exactly what that query was, because it would have made this example more powerful. But the point is that they are not infallible, and they will give different answers and things like that. So anyway, I hope that this opened your eyes a little bit, and join us next month for a similar presentation. Thank you.